Well, hey, Foilers, thanks for joining us for this week's Refoiled episode number 38, The Last Jubilee with Tom Noss. We had a great conversation with Tom. He was one of the first guests on our show. We actually spoke to him right after we spoke to Derek Gilbert. And we had a really interesting conversation on The Last Jubilee. And for those of you that don't know, as we go into 2025, here later in March, we will actually be celebrating the 70th Jubilee since the Exodus from Egypt. Now, that marks a very interesting timeline in the history of things that are tied to Revelation as we continue through 2025. Both Ben and I on the show and a lot of our guests we have all spoken to really feel like the next few years could reveal some interesting biblical prophecy stuff and some things that we read in Revelation. Tom's discussion was very interesting around this topic, and I think it's one that you guys will enjoy, and we plan to have him back on the show here very soon to dive further into this topic, as now we are a year closer to this event. So, until then, enjoy this Refoiled episode number 38, The Last Jubilee with Tom Noss.
"70 elders in the Sanhedrin, 70 sons of Noah, 70 disciples sent out 2 by 2. The 70 is all over the place in the Bible, and it's always in a good way. I don't know what's going to happen, but it's very interesting. Now, let me go over the calculation a little bit. The year 1406 BC is when the Biblical Archaeology Institute says that the Jews entered the land, which started the Jubilee cycle. So if you take that 1406 plus 2025 minus 1, then you're going to get up with 3430. Divide that by 49, and you get 70. Now, we took off the minus 1 because there's no year 0. So the number you get when you divide the amount of years between 1406 BC and 2025, it's 70 Jubilee cycles. So what does that mean? I watch it real close to find out what that means.
Well, hello and welcome to the Tinfoil Hat Club. My name's Kyle.
And I'm Ben.
And thank you for joining us yet again. So we have another guest today, a special guest. The gentleman's name is Tom Noss. And I actually came across Tom when I was kind of looking into everything that's been going on over in Israel with the Heifer situation and the eclipse and just kind of everything that we had going on with that. Part of that process actually led me to Tom's website, which is actually standinfaith.org. He's had that up since 2009, so I'd encourage everybody to go check that out. And I just found some of the information on there fascinating. He went into a really good deep dive explanation on how the Jubilees work, because we actually have the Jubilee that is going to be coming up here later in the year, and that's something that we're going to talk about during the show, and just some of the things that he has on there for end times prophecy and all of that. So really excited to talk with him today. And I'm excited to get into our discussion. So now, Tom, I know that you had said that you have been a Christ follower for 50 years now.
Right. And I got saved a year after I came back from Vietnam in 1973.
That is crazy to think that that's been 50 years ago. I keep having things happen where I'm like 50 years ago, and then he starts talking like right around, that time frame. And I'm like, oh man, that was 50 years ago. So that's pretty crazy. Yeah. So, what kind of led you to start your Stand in Faith website?
Well, I believe we're living in the end time, and that the church is basically not ready. And I feel like, I feel like people need to teach the church how to prepare both spiritually and physically. Yeah. To get ready for the trouble that's coming.
No, for sure. We couldn't agree more. We talk about that all the time, and I know you've listened to our show before, so you've probably heard us say something similar to that. So what are some things specifically for you that kind of point to, we are kind of living in the end times?
Okay. Yeah, I had to just teach a class on this today, in fact. Last night about 8 o'clock, my pastor called and said, "Hey, I'm going to be out tomorrow. I can't make it to Sunday school. So would you take my class?" So I taught on this today. It started out by saying, here's why we're in the end time. First, I talked about the 7-day week of creation, 6 days of creating and 1 day of rest. Mm-hmm. And I went to 2 Peter chapter 3, talking about 1 day is as 1,000 years with the Lord. You take that and apply it to the history, and Bishop Usher said that creation started about 4004 BC. Hmm. So you take 4,000 years BC and 2,000 years AD, you got 6,000 years. And we're getting ready to enter into the 7,000 year, the millennium. And so you got 6 days of creation and 1 day of rest, or 6,000 years of God working his plan and 1 day of the millennial reign of Christ. And we're at that transition period now. We're coming up into it. That's one factor. Other factors are, the Jews getting kicked out of the land in 70 AD and being dispersed around the world until 1948. Now that we've got the Jews in the land, that's a major sign that things are different. Another factor is the technology that mankind has now got to implement the mark of the beast globally in the economic system to cut people off and things like that. 20 years ago, that didn't exist. We're getting ready to go into a cashless society, and when the Antichrist does arise, he's going to have the capability to cut us off.
Yeah.
Those are 3 examples. I think I gave 4 or 5, but off the top of my head, I don't remember the other 2 right now.
I know that one of the things that you said in there, and it's kind of just a theory. I have nothing to back this up, but I've kind of gone down some of the familiar same roads that you have. So it's familiar what you said to me. And when I was looking into it, it seemed like the general consensus that everybody comes to and agrees to is about 4,000 years BC was creation. You get 4,004, you might get a few years here or there. Mm-hmm. And right. Here we are, we're a few years past 6,000, years. Yeah. If you apply that 1 day is 1,000 years to the Lord.
Yeah.
And it just feels like we are in that 7th day right now because we've passed over 6,000. And one of the things that my theory is, and again, just a theory, is that I think we're being given 33 or 32 years, however long Christ was, as a grace period, if you will, on top of that. And because I do think that we are literally looking at the end is, very close. And I know this gets into some hot areas because, you'll have a lot of people that come back and say, no one knows the day or the hour, which I agree with, but I nowhere in there, maybe this is splitting hairs, does it say that, we can't know the year potentially? Because I think there are a lot of clues in there that were potentially dropped for us to maybe know the year. I'm not saying that we do for sure, but I think it's a possibility.
Yeah, there's definitely some years that are on my radar as being high candidates. I don't know which one it is yet, but there's a few of them that, definitely are going to be more auspicious than others.
Yeah. What are some of those years to you?
Well, 2028 is one. 2030 is another one. 2036 is the last one, the latest one. And that's based upon Tim Warner, Pastor Tim Warner from Florida, wrote a book on Revelation, and that's where he thinks is going to be the last year was in there. I tend to think it's going to be 2028 or 2030, but it's all speculation at this point. So we're just watching to see.
Yeah. How do you come to that? Because it's funny because I totally agree. I think that we're right in that time frame. How do you come to the 28 and the 30?
The 30 is based upon the crucifixion date, and 2,000 years from the crucifixion date. I haven't seen any proof that he was crucified in the AD 30, but it's got the most credibility or evidence that I've seen that that's the year when Jesus was crucified. The 28 date, Michael Rood or Monty Judah, one of those two guys I think it's Michael Rood, put out a calendar for the year 28 being the crucifixion date. So, we really don't know. And I'm really surprised at that because, one of the most, or probably the most important thing in history is the crucifixion and the resurrection.
Mm-hmm.
And yet there's not any definite historical evidence for which year it is. That just amazes me.
Yeah. What is your, the 28 date? What sticks out to you that could potentially be a candidate as well?
Well, I don't know off the top of my head. I don't remember exactly how that complication came up other than the crucifixion anniversary of 2,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember the other reasons why that was it.
Now, do you believe that those two dates, do you think that is actually, I guess we're going to get more into the eschatological side of the coin. That's a big word. Do you believe that that is when, Christ is going to actually return and take his followers? Or do you believe that is literally the end, second coming to judge?
I'm tempted to say I think it's both the same thing.
Yeah.
As far as a post-tribulation second coming and resurrection at the second coming. Nelson Walters on YouTube makes a good case for the second, or the resurrection or rapture, however you want to call it, being 1 year before the second coming. And that's based upon the 6 days and 1 day of rest after that. The way he calls it on his YouTube channel is that the 70th week of Daniel, which is 7 years, is 6 years of tribulation, at the end of which the saints are called up to heaven, caught up, in what people call the rapture. And then the 7th year is the time of judgment when the wrath of God is poured out upon the unbelievers that rejected God's salvation on the earth. And then the second coming comes after that. That's a possibility. I don't know. If that's not the case, then I lean toward the post-tribulation second coming and catching away the saints at the second coming.
Yeah, so you're not a pre-trib rapture guy, it sounds like.
No.
I
hope I'm wrong. Yeah. I hope I'm wrong.
Hey, that sounds familiar. Doesn't it, Ben? It sounds a little familiar too. We hope we're wrong. We like your version a lot better than ours, but unfortunately, I trust what the Word of God says, not what the Word of man says. And the Word of God sure reads to me that we're going to be here for some of this stuff.
Yeah. I was thinking about Michael Heiser. I was watching one of his videos, and he pinpointed of probably when Christ was born, going back with the Revelation with the woman in the you see the woman in the stars having a baby, and he said with stellarium it was -2 BC, and so if you go that would put it at the 2830 mark. Then and so I always go back to that, and I'm like, well, there it is right there.
Yeah, he was probably born somewhere between 2 BC and 6 BC, according to the experts. They calculate based upon Herod, when Herod died and things like that, because Herod was trying to kill Jesus, so he was alive when Jesus was born. They don't know exactly, but 2 BC is a good candidate.
Yeah.
Was it September 11th of 2 BC, I think he said, didn't he?
Yeah, that's what he said.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy how that's, great evils are worked on the same day as Christ's supposed birth.
I know.
And man, imagine that.
Yeah.
It's so funny to me because go ahead.
I'm a big fan of Michael Heiser as well.
Yeah.
The late Dr. Michael Heiser.
Yeah.
He's kind of funny in that he doesn't like eschatology.
Yeah, he doesn't.
I can understand that. It's a huge division point for us, but I mean, it shouldn't. There's very few things that really should cause division in the church. Disagreement maybe, but not division. But unfortunately, that's the way that we're conditioned now. We're conditioned to like, if we don't agree, then we have to like hate each other.
Yeah.
Which is hilarious because, your dad gave a great sermon today on forgiveness, which, the church doesn't, exercise at all. Which even in there is like, that's not even forgiveness. I'm like, nobody wronged anybody unless you started, treating each other bad. But like disagreement is okay. It's like, we don't have to agree on everything, that's a great way to, let's get together and dive into what, God's word has to say. And like, it doesn't have to like split us in half. But the thing that Ben and I always come to with the eschatology side, with the pre-trib rapture side, is, man, we watch it and it's sure making a lot of lazy Christians.
Yeah, it does.
Not saying that everybody that believes in a pre-trib rapture is lazy. I want to make sure I make that very clear. That is not what we're saying. But what it does is it basically just says, well, no worries. I'm not going to have to be here and I'm not going to have to suffer. So why prepare? Why do any of the things we need to do to be prepared? And then the other thing that it does is it doesn't do anything to help, others prepare that maybe aren't Christ followers, right? And then they see us with this kind of lackadaisical attitude, and it's, I don't know, it just doesn't ring well. So, but yeah, Heiser's a fascinating guy. He's a big hero of us. I would have loved to have had him on the show, and someday, Mike, we'll talk. But
he was really into some, I don't know what you call far out things. He's got the Naked Bible podcast, and then he was into, I forget what his word for it was, but it was like aliens and stuff like that, or, don't take me literally, but it was things like that. They were kind of, you wouldn't expect from a scholar, know?
Yeah, no, he would, I remember seeing him on an interview, maybe it was Blurry Creatures, but he was talking about how he liked to go to UFO conventions because he said that he was able to have more God-based conversations with people at the UFO conferences that he was, Christians. Like they were more willing to entertain the spiritual side of the coin than even the modern Western church was.
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of fascinating.
Yeah, in fact, his one of his podcasts 3 or 4 years ago is what got me to writing that article about the Jubilee and the calendar, the God's calendar.
Yeah,
he believed that the Zadokite solar calendar was God's calendar based upon his scholarly interpretation of the book of Daniel and the 1260 days and those kinds of things that were in there. He said the only calendar that could fit Daniel was the Zadokite solar calendar. So that was interesting.
Yeah, please do dive into that for us and also our listeners. Kind of explain that because that is a fascinating thing that you do have on your site.
Yeah. Well, Heiser, I was driving back. I've been camping for a week for the Feast of Tabernacles here in Virginia. And I was driving home after camping for a week, and I was listening to his podcast. And he came up with this statement that was the only calendar, the Zadokite solar calendar, was the only one that fit the book of Daniel. And all the rest of them didn't fit because they had to be in a 1260-day cycle. And the other ones didn't do that. So that got me studying the whole solar versus lunar and all that, and looked at the history of the Maccabean revolt and how the Levitical priesthood and the sons of Zadok were in the priesthood until the Maccabean revolt, at which time Antiochus Epiphanes and those guys around him basically fired the true priesthood in the Jewish religion, the high priest, and installed people that bid the highest bidder. And they weren't even Levitical. They were of other tribes. But if they paid off the Greeks that were in charge in Palestine at the time, they would give them the high priesthood, and that's how the priesthood got corrupted from then on. And that's also when they changed the calendar from the solar to the lunar. And the Essenes went out from Jerusalem and they went out into Qumran because they looked at the whole priesthood and the Jerusalem religious leadership as being corrupt. They called them the sons of darkness. and went out to Qumran and wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls. And, they ended up getting wiped out around 70 AD when the Romans wiped everybody else out. But it was interesting. It was an interesting study.
Yeah, no. Do you believe that? So, from what you're saying, just make sure I'm clear. Do you believe that the group that went out to Qumran were those Zadokite priests?
Well, they were probably some of the Zadokite priests, but they believed in the Zadokite calendar, and they were Levitical. A lot of them were Levitical priests and sons of Aaron, descendants of Aaron. And they saw the corruption that was going on with the compromise with the Gentiles, and so then they left and did their own thing, basically.
Yeah, I'm going to pull it up here, but I can't remember where it is in Matthew. But there's a point in Matthew where most of us just miss it if we don't understand the history, which I didn't understand the history for a long time. Where Christ is basically telling, I think it's Matthew 23. Christ is basically telling the disciples and telling the crowd, you need to follow the teachings of the Pharisees, because they sit in Moses' seat, but don't do what they do because they're hypocrites. And the reason he says that to them is because they were the ones that replaced the Zadokite priesthood. So there's a reason that he says exactly what he says. And it is, I just have it pulled up here. And again, we're going to read from the CJB. It's Matthew 23, verses 1 through 4. I'll go 1 through 4. Then Yeshua addressed the crowds in his Talmudim, which are the disciples, the Torah teachers, and the Pershim. He said, sit in the seat of Moses. So whatever they tell you, take care to do it. But don't do what they do, because they talk but don't act. They tie heavy loads on the people's shoulders but won't lift a finger to help carry them. Everything they do is done to be seen by others, for they make their tefillin broad and their tezoyit long, which, unless you got a quick translation, Ben, I don't remember off the top of my head. Basically, they're hypocrites.
Yeah.
Don't follow them. They love the place of honor at banquets and the best seats in the synagogues, and they love being greeted differentially in the marketplaces and being called.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got my...
There you go. Oh, look, he's got his CJB over there. Oh, man.
Yeah.
Our hearts are beating faster by the second, Tom.
So you, I know this is jumping off. So you celebrate the feast days as well?
Yes, I just hosted a Passover, in fact.
We just did a Passover at our church, so.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did I go to a Baptist church now, but I just hosted it at the church. Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, they asked me to.
Yeah.
It's really surprised me.
Yeah.
Tefillin, I believe that's the box that the Jewish people put on their head when they pray.
Oh, yeah.
And God told them in the Shema in Deuteronomy 6, I think it is, to put the scriptures on your head and on your forearm. And they wrap that leather around their forearm.
Yep.
You've seen the pictures of that? Yeah, I think that's the tefillin. And the other thing that was long is probably their
Seats.
tzitzit. Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
I totally butchered that. I'm a bad Jew. I'm not Jewish, but I would make a bad Jew if I was Jewish.
Jewish. Basically.
Yeah, they're not. It says tzitzit are specially knotted ritual fringes or tassels worn in antiquity by Israelites and today by observant Jews and Samaritans.
It's supposed to make you remember the law.
Oh,
Right.
because
I think they're blue and white, and you have to make them yourself.
however many knots are in it, does that represent the law?
Yeah, and it's a lot of people do.
Yeah, crazy.
This is a version of one.
Yeah.
And you see the tzitzit here with the blue thread.
Yeah, okay.
And that, like Ben said, that's going to make people remember the law. That's the purpose of it. And there's one on each of the four quarters.
Mm-hmm.
And they use this, I'm trying to think what they call this cloth, and I can't remember off the top of my head what it is. But they use this in a marriage. They stretch it out as a canopy over the couple, And this represents the, when God says in the Psalms, or when David said, he will cover you with his wings. These are the wings. This is the prayer shawl of what I can't remember what the correct term is, though. It's bugs me.
So there you go, a little visual aid there for you on the Tinfoil Hat Club. So for those of you that haven't checked out the video yet, there's your motivation to go do that. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people that do that though, but no, that's fantastic. So, you get into kind of, explaining that in the calendar. What do you think the motivation was to monkey with the calendar? What do you think the reason behind that?
Well, how do I say the Greeks, because Antiochus was, in the Greek culture, although it was a Roman government. So it's a little bit complicated. I don't remember exactly how that works together, Greek versus Roman, but he wanted to outlaw everything Jewish. He made it illegal to circumcise your babies, your sons. He made it illegal to worship on the Sabbath. He made it illegal to, follow the feast. All the things that Jews had to do, he outlawed it. And he killed people for breaking that law. There were a lot of people killed before the Maccabees revolted and overcame that dynasty with the Maccabean revolt. And after they won, like Antiochus is the one that killed the pig and put the blood on the altar of the temple and put the statue of Zeus in the temple and all that. He defiled the temple. Mm-hmm. And the Maccabean revolt is when they overcame that evil government and cleansed the temple. And that's why Hanukkah is celebrated now. It's the Feast of Rededication, when they rededicated the temple. Mm. So Jesus celebrated or attended it actually in John chapter 10. But why did they change the calendar? Just to make the Jews comply with the Gentile systems. They wanted them to not be Jewish. They wanted them to be Gentile. And so it goes back to forcing the Jews to try to be Gentiles. And now we have a nice term for it. They call it Hellenize, the Hellenization of the Jewish people.
Yeah. Yeah, you hear that in conjunction with each other, the Hellenization period, and then the Maccabean timeline is typically shared. And then there's a Hasmonean dynasty is also another one that's in there. So now,
right.
The Hasmonean dynasty was the group that kind of came out of the after effect of that, right? Or is that before?
I believe so. I'm not real clear on that one. I want to say that Herod and his family were part of that. I'm not sure though.
Yeah.
But they weren't legitimate priests like they should have been. The descendants of Aaron, they weren't in that group.
Yeah.
I think Herod's group were out of Edom or something like that. I don't know exactly now, but they weren't Aaronic priesthood.
Yeah, you can tell that there was no love lost between whatever the group was that wound up in Qumran. And I have my theories on that we've kind of talked about on the show before. There was no love lost between that group and the Pharisees and Sadducees. Yeah. They did not like each other, or the Maccabees for that period, because they have found no copies of anything that had to do with anything Maccabean war, or literally no books of Maccabees in Qumran, in the Dead Sea Scrolls whatsoever. So they were clearly not pro-Maccabee.
Well, it kind of reminds me of the first President Bush back in the 90s. He invaded Iraq after the Kuwaiti invasion, after Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. Then we took 6 months, geared all of our stuff up, took the coalition, and he invaded Iraq. We got all the way up to Baghdad and stopped.
Yeah.
And then, Saddam Hussein surrendered or whatever, and we didn't do anything. We left him in charge. We left that dynasty there underneath, our control, basically. And that's kind of what the Maccabees did. they won the war, and then they said, well, we better make peace with these guys now, or else Rome is going to send the legions in and wipe us out. So what they did was they compromised with the Greek, the Hellenization people, and they corrupted the whole Jewish system when they did that. And what we've got today in modern Judaism is the latest version of that. The Pharisees and the Sadducees that were in Jesus' time, they continued on and on. The Sadducees were over the temple, mainly. The Pharisees were over the synagogue system. And in 70 AD, when the temple got destroyed, the Sadducees lost their power and they kind of faded away. But the Pharisees continued on, and then you got they wrote the Talmud, which is basically the oral tradition of the Jews. And now they place that at the same level or even above the scripture. Just like some denominations in the Christian world place their oral tradition above the scripture.
No, they don't do that.
What silly talk. Oh my goodness.
Tradition trumps everything,
It
doesn't
does.
it?
It's sad. Yeah. It's really sad. Yeah. We've gotten into, like Easter. We just celebrated Easter, and we always find it comical that here we're celebrating a pagan holiday, on a day that has nothing to do with Christ's death or resurrection. Cause it's like, how many days before the Passover was it? It was like, I forget how many weeks before Passover it was. And clearly we know that, Christ was sacrificed right at Passover and then didn't rise until, 3 days after. So, and that's the whole thing is like, when you start digging into this stuff and you go back from a historical perspective, you start finding out, it's like anything else. It doesn't make any difference. You need to know the history to know how things got to be the way they are so that you understand what you're even worshiping or celebrating.
Yeah.
And when you do that, then it starts to highlight to you the fallacy of some of the things that are tradition based versus true faith based.
Yeah. And the Jewish things I've been talking about since the Maccabees are an example of that. I mean, we look today at the Jewish religion and we say, well, it's been going like this for thousands of years, and it has. But there was a big change in 164 BC. Before that, it was a lot different than it is since then, and it got corrupted at that point. People don't realize that. They just, it's been so long ago, and tradition, makes it seem like this is the way it's always been, but it hasn't. It changed a lot in that Maccabean revolt time frame.
Yeah, no, it really did. It seems to me too, that's when you had like things like the Book of Jubilees and the Book of Enoch and all these things. They kind of just went by the wayside, and kind of by the time that we started developing canon in our belief system, they were nowhere to be found. And it just seems like it's all kind of tied together, that there were things that happened during that time frame and who came out of it and what their beliefs were that wound up controlling the temple and controlling the synagogues, because they were the law of the Jews of the day. And if they were pro something, then they kept it. And if they were anti something, then out it went.
Right. I remember what they call this prayer shawl. It's a tallit.
Yes.
A tallit.
Yeah. Tallit.
There you go.
Yep.
Now, where do you stand on some of those books? Have you read like the Book of Enoch, Book of Jubilees, any of that stuff? Have you read it?
Uh-huh. Yeah. Book of Jasher. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Jasher's the one I haven't really gotten into so far, because everything I've read so far is it says that supposedly is not an authentic copy. It said the real copy's been lost. I know you've read the Book of Jasher.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's your take on that? Do you think it should be part of scripture, or are you good where it is?
I'm good where it is. I think Enoch probably has more evidence for it to be part of scripture if they were going to do that. But there's some things in there that I'd have trouble with reconciling with the rest of scripture. if they did add it. So I'm good where it is right now.
Yeah. What are some things that stick out to you on that front?
Oh, I haven't read it for a while, but there were some things about, it made it sound like we were going to be divine. And I don't remember off the top of my head what the exact verses were that kind of tripped me up a little bit, but there's a lot of good things in there too, though. So I think it's good to read and good to study. I know Heifer, Dr. Heifer did a lengthy, detailed course on Enoch. So, he respected it.
Yeah. Yeah. He's got two kind of compendiums that go with, I would love to get my hands on go with the Book of Enoch. But kind of shifting gears a little bit, something else that you have that I found fascinating on your website that I'd love for you to dive into and kind of talk about is, the Jubilee system, how the Jubilee system works. We've talked about it a little bit on a show, but I think it's good to kind of do a deeper dive into it. And then beyond that, like what is actually getting ready to come up here later this year. So go ahead and kind of dive into that and explain to everybody if you would.
Well, I'll give you the background a little bit. The in the Old Testament, God told Moses to set up this. They got the 7-day week Sabbath cycle, and then you've got 7 weeks. Right. Well, let me back up. 7 days is a week. 7 weeks is a Shemitah period. All right. So in Leviticus 25, they start out talking verses 1 through 7 about the Sabbath year. All right. And then, so that's every 7th year is a Shemitah year, when the land is supposed to rest. You're not supposed to plant or harvest anything during that year. And even now, the Jews do follow that. When I was in Israel, I think it's 2015, I noticed the signs in the fields were fallow, they weren't planted, and there was a sign out there saying, this is a Shemitah year, so we're letting the field rest. So every 7th year is a day of a year of rest. And then 7 of those Shemitah periods, or 49 years, is a Jubilee cycle. The following year after that is a Jubilee year. So the 50th year is a Jubilee year. Now that confuses people because they say, it's a 50-year cycle, but it's not. It's a 49-year cycle. Just like the 8th day, when you talk about the Feast of Tabernacles, you've got a 7-day feast, and then you've got the 8th day. And the 8th day is not part of the 7. It's a new day. For example, if you look at the days of the week, Sunday, or let's start with Monday, because that's the way us Gentiles do it. Monday through Sunday is 7 days, right?
Yeah.
All right. So Monday through Sunday is 7 days. The 8th day would be another Monday. It wouldn't be something, you wouldn't include that 8th day as part of the 7. It would start another 7-day cycle.
Yeah.
So the 8th day is both a Monday, it's the 8th day, and it's also the first day of the next 7-day period. And that's the way the Jubilee cycle works. It's 7 times 7, 49 years. And then the next year is the first year of the next 49-year cycle. But it's also the 50th year, and it's a year of rest. So it's a little bit hard to explain. I put a video in that article in my website that explains it a lot better than I just did. But a lot of people get tripped up because it's confusing 49 versus 50. And it's important because if you multiply 49 times, in this case, the article is about the 70th Jubilee. So 70 times 49 is going to be a lot different than 70 times 50.
Yeah.
So that's why it matters. All right. So in this case, if you look at when the Jubilee cycle started, when the children of Israel entered the land, after their 40 years in the wilderness, after the Exodus, they entered the promised land and went into Jericho and all that. So the first year that they started or entered the land, that's when the cycle started. And they were given the law in this Leviticus 25 passage during that 40 years in the wilderness. So they had the law when they entered the land. But they never in history have celebrated or obeyed this commandment to let the land rest for the year of Jubilee. And not only let the land rest, but it's to return all inheritances to everyone. So if your tribe got an inheritance of land, an allotment of land, that's your tribal allotment. And if it got sold during that 49-year period, on the year of Jubilee, you get it back. And it always reverted back to the original owners that were assigned by lot, casting lots. They cast lots for the assignment of the land under Joshua. And whatever your allotment was, that was it. And your family would always be able to go back to that after the next Jubilee. So they never did obey that command to do this. I guess, number one, there's a couple of reasons why. One is that they would have to let the land rest for like 3 years before they'd get food harvested again. And that takes a lot of faith to not plant or harvest for 3 years. Because what you got is the 49th year is a Shemitah year, a normal, 7 cycle Shemitah year. Then you've got the 50th year, which is the year of Jubilee, when everybody gets their inheritance back. But then the following year, you plant in the spring and you don't get harvest until the fall. So you've got 2.5 to 3 years before you get your food. And people just didn't have the faith to do that. Mm-hmm. And also, to be able, if you bought land or you sold land, for all those deals to be wiped out, that was just too much for them to handle. They couldn't handle it. So that's the literal, physical explanation for Jubilee. There's also a spiritual application, and that is, I believe that we pre-existed before we were born from our mother, however many years ago. I believe our spirits pre-existed with God. We were created, but we didn't start when we were conceived in the womb. Our spirit started way back thousands of years ago. All right. And the sin entered the spiritual realm before Adam's creation. I wrote about all this in my book, An Overcomer's Treasure Map. It's on my website. So I won't go into detail about all that stuff. But the spiritual application is that our spirits, God wants to redeem us spiritually. He wants to give our spirits redemption. So the way he's doing it is through our physical human salvation process that he created in this realm right now, the physical earth. And when we get saved, we're born again. We receive the Holy Spirit as a down payment, an earnest of our inheritance. Our inheritance is glorification spiritually, and to return the inheritance, return what we lost before Adam, and we're going to get that back. We're going to get it back plus whatever we achieve in this life for rewards. So in my mind, that's our inheritance, is that spiritual glorification and redemption that we're going to get in the fulfillment of Jubilee.
Okay. So now coming up this October is going to be the 70th. It's the announcement of the 70th Jubilee, because this is something else that you throw into the mix on the 49 and 50 are the same year, right? Or I'm sorry, that's incorrect. The 50 and the first year of the next cycle are the same year. But then complicating matters further is, and you correct me if I'm wrong here because I think I understand it, but you're more versed in this than I. When you get to like in October of this year, which would be the 49th year, 6 months before the beginning of the next cycle, or the 50th year and also the first year, you actually have the Feast of Trumpets, which I think you said, Ben, right? That's what the Feast of Trumpets would be. Is that correct, Tom?
Yeah, the trumpet that announces Jubilee is blown on Yom Kippur, the feast, the Day of Atonement. And it's, I believe that what you're talking about, let me back up. This whole confusing scenario about the 6 month difference, I didn't realize it when I wrote the article. And then one of the people in the comments below, a woman, said, hey, wait a minute. The trumpet is blown on to announce the year of Jubilee on Yom Kippur. All right, it says that in Leviticus chapter 25, verse 9, then you shall sound the trumpet on the 10th day of the 7th month. On the Day of Atonement, you shall sound the trumpet throughout all your land. And it's talking about Jubilee. And you shall consecrate the 50th year and proclaim liberty throughout the land to all its inhabitants. It shall be a jubilee for you when each of you shall return to his property, and each of you shall return to his clan. All right, so the trumpet's blown on the Day of Atonement to announce it, and then after that starts the year of Jubilee. Well, I'm thinking about, there's a lot of tradition about Rosh Hashanah, the Feast of Trumpets. It's the first day of the 7th month. All right, nobody understands. Why did God place this feast, this festival, the Yom Teruah is the name of it? Why did he put that in the calendar? We don't know what it's tied to. We don't know what the fulfillment of it is. And then over time, the Jewish people came up with Rosh Hashanah, which means head of the year. And they say that that's the new year. I don't remember if it's a civil or religious. I think it's the civil New Year. I might have it wrong, but that's one of the New Years. The other New Year is the first day of the first month in the springtime, before Passover. So they have 2 New Years. Well, actually they have 4, but these are the 2 big ones. And so I was thinking that, well, it must be Rosh Hashanah must be the beginning of the year of Jubilee, because that's the head of the year in their tradition. But that's nowhere in the Bible. You won't find Rosh Hashanah in the Bible at all. So it's a tradition. So then I'm confused, because which is it? When does it start? When's the year start for the year of Jubilee? Well, this lady commented in my article and said that the beginning of the year is in the springtime. It says that in Exodus. It very clearly says, this shall be the beginning of the year for you. And so I got to thinking, and I said, well, she's right. So the trumpet is announcing the year of Jubilee, but it is not the inauguration or beginning of it.
Yeah.
It's just the announcement that it's coming.
Yeah.
So the following New Year in the springtime seems like the natural place to start the year of Jubilee. So it's kind of a long answer to your question.
No. That's great, because it seems like, I think when I did the math, it's like April, sometime in April.
Yeah.
Was when they actually will celebrate the beginning of the year from a historical perspective. So
yeah, now it depends on what calendar you're using too.
That's very
If you're
true.
using the lunar calendar, it's in April, but if you're using the solar calendar, it's right around within a couple of days of the spring equinox.
Yeah.
Which is March 21st. And then it could be up to 3 or 4 days after that, if on the solar calendar, if you're using that.
Yeah. Now, it just seems so coincidental to me that we have all of these things that are going on that we can see happening in the world. And then just so happens that this coming Jubilee is the 70th Jubilee.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think that is
Right.
also very interesting from a time perspective that we would be heading into that. And we did something a few weeks ago where you looked up how many parables Christ taught, and he taught 70 parables.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just so fascinating. And what the parable was about childbirth.
Yeah.
And he talked about birth pains and all these things.
Yeah.
How do you think all this kind of fits together from the Jubilee cycle and all of that for kind of the end times prophecy side of the coin?
Well, watch it real close.
Yeah.
70 is
Amen, brother.
is a big number in the Bible.
Yeah, absolutely.
You get 70 elders in the Sanhedrin, 70 sons of Noah, the table of nations in Genesis 10, 70 disciples sent out 2 by 2. The 70 is all over the place in the Bible, and it's always in a good way. So I'm just watching. I don't know what's going to happen, but it's very interesting. Now, let me go over the calculation a little bit. We had, all right, the year 1406 BC is when the Biblical Archaeology Institute says that the Jews entered the land, which started the Jubilee cycle. All right, so if you take that, 1406.
I'm not pulling a calculator up right now. Sorry, Tom.
1406 plus 2024.
It's 3, 4, 3, 34.
Or no, 2025 minus 1.
Okay.
I'll explain that. Then you're going to get up with 3430.
Yep.
Yeah.
Divide that by 49, and you get 70.
Yeah.
All right. Now we took off the minus 1 because there's no year 0.
Yeah. Right.
So 2025 is the number you get when you divide the amount of years between 1406 BC and 2025. It's 70 Jubilee cycles.
Mm.
So what does that mean? I'm watching real close to find out what that means.
Tom, that's not good enough. We want to know what you think. We're going to poke and prod you until you tell us what your theory is. That's okay. We're not going to hold you to it. It's always fun. Now, this is the part where we just give the disclaimer to everybody. Tom's not saying these things are going to happen. What is going to follow, if Tom is willing to do it, is what Tom thinks will happen. Is that fair enough? Did we put a get the asterisk next to that?
Well, I really don't know. I could see the pattern. I could do the math, but I'm looking around at the world situation.
Yeah.
And, we've got the wars in Israel and all that going on. We got the red heifer. There's a lot of things happening, but the way I look at the sequence of end time events, I'm not sure where we are right now. And there's a lot of there. Well, let me back up. In Daniel and in Revelation, God told Daniel, seal up these things until the time of the end.
Mm-hmm.
Many will run to and fro, and knowledge will be increased and all that. And at the time of the end, they'll understand. But until then, you're not going to understand. And the same thing in the 7 thunders in Revelation. God told John, seal them up. Don't tell anybody what that means. So there's things that we don't understand because they're sealed. And I hesitate to speculate too much. I think it's auspicious. I think that the 70th Jubilee is something that's going to happen, but I don't know what or exactly how or when. And in fact, this coming Yom Kippur, this fall of 2024, it may be the time that the trumpet is blown, announcing the following springtime. Or it could be the 2025, because that's what the math works out to, is the year 2025 is the 70th Jubilee. So whether it's at the 6 months before it starts in springtime of 2025, or whether it's the Yom Kippur of 2025, I don't know. But we're getting close, one way or the other, it's getting close.
Well, let's just say
another thing,
they do blow the trumpet and Christ returns. That'd been the trump that heard around the world, right?
Yeah, but I don't think that's going to be the second coming.
No,
I may be wrong. I hope so, but I don't think things are bad enough yet.
No, it's not yet. Sorry.
No, we're not going to get out of some bad stuff, unfortunately. It's just not the way it reads. Like I said, you said it earlier. We say it too. We like their version better, but that's just not the way it looks.
But now, here's what I am thinking that could be the possibility, and that is that another book I wrote on my website is called Arise, Shine. And my belief is that the rapture, the harpazo event, is not the catching away into heaven and being glorified, receiving our glorified bodies at that time, and, being resurrected forever. I don't think that's what it is. I think the harpazo event is the latter rain outpouring of the Spirit and the empowerment of Christian believers, disciples, not just believers, disciples, to proclaim the gospel of the kingdom to every nation and to every person on the earth. And it's not going to be just a, come to Jesus thing. It's going to be a gospel ultimatum. Either follow this way or follow the beast. You got a choice. And whatever path you pick, it's going to be clear. And I believe that the spiritual empowerment to do that is what is referred to as the harpazo. And to back that up, an example of that is when Paul was caught up to the third heaven, 14 years before, it's in 2 Corinthians. And he was caught up to the third heaven, and he heard things that he couldn't repeat. And when he was caught up to heaven, the word harpazo is used. That's how he was caught up. He was raptured. But then he came back down to earth, and he spent many more years ministering in his physical body until he had his head cut off. So I think it's the same thing as far as we're going to have a spiritual outpouring of the Spirit on the disciples of Jesus, the mature disciples that have a good heart, the 144,000, if you will. And those people are going to be empowered to preach the gospel. And in Matthew 24, it says, this gospel of the kingdom will be preached unto every nation or all the world, and then the end will come. And I think that's what's going to happen. Now, this Jubilee may have something to do with that. It may be part of that outpouring, receiving our inheritance through the Spirit. And Jesus said, greater things you will do than Jesus did. So I'm expecting that to happen in some group of people before the end time.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That's interesting. I like that.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's a better version, but I like that. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. We're not on the receiving end. We're not passive. The disciples of Jesus are going to be the ones that are overcomers in the end time. And, most or all of them are going to be martyred by the enemy, by the Antichrist and his people. But in the meantime, there's going to be billions of people that come to the Lord, come to faith. And in Revelation 7, it talks about an innumerable multitude that's coming to faith. And it's right after the 144,000 passage. So I believe that's what's going to happen.
Interesting. Now, to kind of cycle back a little bit, you had mentioned the red heifer, which is a green flag for Kyle to go there. Master interview skills there. Thanks for the segue, Tom. Just to dive into that, because I know we talked a little bit before we started hitting record, and you said you had a little bit different view on it than maybe some do, but obviously we've got that going on, and it sure seems like, that they were supposed to do it this time or that time or Passover or whatever, and it didn't happen. But obviously there's a lot of things going on over there and a lot of heat. What's your take on that whole scenario, on that red heifer thing, and just kind of share your view on that? What do you think?
Yeah, I think they took 5 red heifers from Texas over there, and last I heard, they had 3 or 4 that were still good candidates. They've got the Old Testament law is that they've got to sacrifice a red heifer and use the ashes of that sacrifice to cleanse the priesthood before they can offer sacrifices in God's temple or on the altar. And so this whole red heifer discussion is about sanctifying the priests and making them ritually clean in order to present sacrifices on the altar, in a physical altar. My personal belief is they may do that. I mean, they're setting up to do it, but I think that's a sideshow. The altar and the physical temple. I've been to the Temple Institute. They're ready to do it. They've got all the stuff they need. They want to do it, but Jesus said, "Your house is left unto you desolate." And no one stone will be placed upon another after the Romans come through in 70 AD. And that was all fulfilled. So even if they build another temple and sacrifice and all that, it may be used for fulfilling the prophecy about stopping the sacrifice in the middle of the 7 years. That may happen. But I'm not really fixed on that physical temple and red heifer scenario too much, because to me it's not spiritually. It doesn't help me to grow spiritually or help anybody else. It's just something that may happen or may not happen as a signpost of where we're at in prophecy.
Yeah,
but
totally agree.
Is it a moo point?
Oh, look at you. Look at this guy. You've been hanging out with me way too much, brother. Hey, that pun was bovine.
Yeah.
Oh, look at that. Oh, we could do this all day. So let me ask you this. What did you see? Because I agree with you. We talk about it on the show, and we've talked about it quite a bit, because I think it's just another thing that points to how close we're getting. It's just one more signpost. That's a great way to put it. Signpost of kind of where we are for the end times. And, the other thing too is, I think for the first time in history, we've talked about this several times before too, and it's worth repeating. Everybody prior to us and our generations prior to us have had claims to thinking it's the end time. And the difference here is, I think they were mainly operating on people's behavior, and things they would see in wars and that. The difference here is we literally have all of these other things that are starting to happen and take place that have never happened before. So I know that everybody's had the claim, but this is very unique, some of the things that are happening. Now, to kind of go along with that, what was your take on, did you think that there was any kind of prophetic word or any message for us, excuse me, in the eclipse that just happened?
Could be. A lot of cities named Nineveh. That could be meaningful, but I'm not looking at it too much. We had this 2017 one and 2024 one, making a big X on the U.S. And, it could be that there's a big X on the U.S., as in a bullseye, and it's getting ready to be judged. I don't know. Can't tell you.
We'll see, I guess, right? Keep your eye to the sky is what we say.
Yeah.
Yeah. As long as we're serving the Lord and, in relationship with Him, we got nothing to worry about.
Yeah. We say the same thing. It's just one sign. It's things to look for. It's nothing to get hang on every second or live in fear or any of these things. Cause, I'm fond of saying the mission never changes, whether it's one day before Christ returns or 5,000 years before Christ returns. It doesn't make any difference. Our mission never changes, which is just to get as many people to Christ as we can, and save as many souls as we can. including our own and our family, obviously, and friends and loved ones, but everybody, right? So shifting gears a little bit, one of the other things that we had kind of talked about before we started recording is, and you can find this on the standinfaith.org website, is you get into some of the physical preparations too. So I want to kind of give you an opportunity to go there, because I don't think that's something that we necessarily have talked about too much, which are the physical preparations of the side of the coin. If we think that these things are going to happen, and if we base everything on, as we should, the Bible, it says it's going to get pretty doggone bad. So go ahead and dive into that, if you will, some of the things you want to touch upon there.
Okay. Yeah, I'm a local leader in an organization called preparedness.net, their website, but they've got hundreds of city groups around the country, and I'm the leader in the one in Central Virginia. I've got about 100 people, in the group, and we have monthly meetings, we have campouts and training. We do a lot of training on homesteading kind of things like gardening, livestock, beekeeping, canning, preserving food, all those kinds of things. As well as I'm a ham radio operator. So tonight I'll be getting onto a network with guys from Texas and Tennessee and other places. They're also in PrepperNet. And we send digital messages back over ham radio to each other. And it's a way to make contact with people, communicate when grid is down, anything like that. I'm not big into the gun. I'm an ex-Marine infantryman, but I'm not big on guns and what I call prepper porn. People that think the zombies are going to come out and bust into everybody's home and take all your stuff and you got to kill them. I don't go along with that stuff. So I'm more into the homesteading.
Yeah.
I've got guns and I know how to use them, but it's a tool. It's like a hammer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
Yeah. How much?
Anyway.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I was going to say, we have the monthly meetings and we'll try to have training in every one of them. The last time we had a meeting, I should say this month, was on ham radio and using that for communications between me and another guy that's about 50 miles away and being able to talk to each other or send messages. So I had a guy at church today ask me to do one on gardening, and we just did one, but he wasn't at that one. So things like that. We're trying to improve skills for food, water. Water purification is a big one because you can't really live without clean water. You're going to get sick and die.
Yeah.
So food, water, shelter, having a wood stove is key in the wintertime. If you can have one, or some other way to heat your place if you have you live in a cold climate like we do. If you're not Florida.
Yeah, exactly.
Even Florida gets down to freezing.
Yeah, it does. Oh, they freak out when it gets down to 70.
Yeah.
Bunch of sissies. All my family down there in Florida. I'm talking about you pansies.
So all those kinds of preparedness things that are just good common sense. I mean, Proverbs talks about if you see the trouble coming, a wise man will prepare.
Yeah.
So, we know trouble's coming. We know there's going to be shortages. The pandemic taught us that.
Yeah.
And it's going to, we're going to have an economic collapse sometime in the future. It's mathematically certain that, we can't keep going $1 trillion or $2 trillion in debt. No, $1 trillion in interest payment a year.
Yeah.
And by the end of this year, if we stay on this trend, it's $1.6 trillion in interest. And that's unsustainable. We can't do that. So
yeah, no.
You can't print that much money and still have value in the dollar.
That's right.
One or the other's got to break.
So one of the things I've always wondered is, and I thought this the last several years when I do my taxes, I thought to myself, you know what, if we're going to print as much money as we ever need, why do you need mine?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. I thought about that too.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I'm thinking that every day.
But the trouble's coming, so being prepared is just common sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Having food, water, shelter, community, those kinds of things are common sense.
Yeah. Now, we've talked about it before, I think maybe on the show, maybe it's been a while back, but the other thing too is like, let's say that we're completely nuts. And let's just say that none of this bad stuff that we see in the Bible that has been proven more and more true every day that we go is actually going to happen. All right. What we do know for a fact that everybody can agree on, even if you're not necessarily, a Christ follower, is we need to be less dependent on the government than we are, and less dependent on all of the luxuries that we have currently than we are, because we are completely 100% in a lot of cases, myself included, dependent on someone else to provide my power and my water, or whatever the case would be. And I always like to say a good litmus test for if you want to know what your life would be like, just remove electricity. Just remove electricity and run through the mental exercise of start at your day when you wake up. Your alarm clock's not going to go off because you're not going to have one. Your phone's going to be dead. So good luck there. Then you get up and you stumble over to the bathroom and you go to turn the light on. That's not going to work because there is no power. And then you go over to the sink. And in my case, since it's up on the, 2 floors above where my water's coming into the house, and I go to turn my tap on, and nope, don't have any water because there's nothing that's, the bladder tank is deflated and there's nothing to charge it to throw water upstairs. And I mean, I can't shave. This just goes on and on. There's no morning coffee that you're going to be, at your disposal for you to run through your Keurig or whatever. And this just keeps going on and on and on. And you just realize how dependent we are. And it's kind of scary.
I'll just put wood on my wood stove and make coffee and sit on my deck.
That's good. That's what we should do.
And not worry about it for a couple days.
There you go. And load your guns. I know. I just said that to tease Tom a little bit. Just in case the zombies come.
There is a time for being wise.
Yeah.
Based on the DEFCON, if you will.
Yeah.
If there's a lot of civil unrest or whatever around where you're living, then, avoid those places, or, make sure you can protect yourself if you have to. Yeah.
What are some good tools out there? You had mentioned the website. What are some good tools out there for people if they want to kind of look into some of the things that you're talking about? Where are some good places for them to go?
I list them on my website under the preparedness tab. I forget let me see if I
actually got it pulled up here. I can share with you.
Yeah.
Some
physical preparations.
Yeah.
tab.
A couple recommended books that you have is the Prepper's Blueprint. Resilient Gardener is another one that you have there. You did say 5 crops that you need to survive and thrive: potatoes, corn, beans, squash, and eggs. So, yeah.
Yeah. And a butchering book.
Yes.
How to butcher animals.
Yes.
I've got a homestead in Virginia. We've been here about going on 8 years. And, so far we've butchered chickens and sheep, getting ready to do cows probably at the end of the year. I've helped other people with that. But, fish, they're people that don't know how to do these things. They need, you might have to do it.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So it's good to have a book like that. And it really helped me learn how to do sheep, for example.
Yeah.
If you can do a sheep, you can do a deer or a goat. Same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the same anatomy, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. It's basically the same thing. Below that, I've got the Mormon LDS preparedness manual. And, I'm not, suggesting anybody become a Mormon, but they put out some really good information about preparedness.
Yeah.
And
interesting.
They've been doing that for a long time.
Yeah. First sentence here, I will read it just to back up what you just said. I don't subscribe to the Latter-day Saint theology. So no, but hey, everybody can come up with good tools, man.
Yeah. And I know there's a lot of good Mormon people that I really like.
Oh yeah.
But, yeah. But I can say the same thing about a lot of other religions too.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely.
And then underneath that, I've got 4 websites listed: Survival Blog, Edible Wild Food, Revelation Timeline Decoded. That's the spiritual thing there. That's not physical. And the Organic Prepper. So yeah, there's some good resources out there for people.
Yeah. Very cool.
And here you can also join PrepperNet. It's free. Preppernet.net. It's a nationwide organization. No matter where people are listening from, even Canada, they've got places. They can usually find a group near them.
Yeah. All right. There you go. I do have a quick question because I'm curious, because this is something I've thought of myself. How much is it to get a ham radio these days?
If you buy them new, I don't have the top of the line one. I paid $1,000 for my radio.
Holy smokes.
Another $500 for the battery system.
Oh my goodness.
Another couple hundred. You've got to be $2,000 by the time you get your antenna and all that. Then you got to get your license. FCC license.
Imagine that.
But it's and then there's a learning curve. You can't just plug it in and turn it on and play it. There's a learning curve to it. So it's good to have somebody help you get started and learn how to do it.
Interesting. Well, very cool.
And now, short of the ham radio, you can go to Walmart and buy little walkie-talkies and talk to people, within a half mile or so of your house without any license, no training, and, they're cheap, $25 or whatever. So, that's an option if you don't need to go a long distance.
Yeah. Very cool. Now, one other thing that I wanted to cover that you had mentioned, I think before we hit record, was you are in the process of kind of taking some of these things that you have on your websites now and actually writing a fiction book with that. So go ahead. I want to give you a couple minutes to go ahead and explain that to everybody.
Yeah, taking my 2 books off my website, the Overcomer's Treasure Map and Arise Shine, and I'm putting that into a fictional story format with, characters that are engaging and interesting setting. For example, the heroine is a Alaska native in Ketchikan, Alaska area. She's got to become an Army helicopter pilot, and her Distinguished Flying Cross, Purple Heart, and all that. Come back and run into the world system as far as she's going to lose her job. She's going to have all kinds of trouble because she's a Christian and she can't sign up to the world system's dictates.
Mm-hmm.
So in the end, they're going to end up off-grid in a small group of people who are non-compliant, if you will, with the world system. So in the middle, there's going to be, earthquakes, nuclear war, all the things in Revelation that are coming upon the earth.
Yeah.
They're all in the book and in the sequence that I see them coming. And it's all in this book in a fictional format. So you can follow the character through with the way I think it's going to happen in the next few years.
Yeah.
And it's available.
That's why you didn't want to tell us, because you got a book.
Well, yeah, but it's fiction. I'll make sure people know it's fiction. So if I get it wrong, it's fiction.
I disclaimer, Tom. That's what I do when I give people my ideas. So there you go. No, by all means, please.
I got a question.
Yeah.
Do you think the feast days are kind of like a rehearsal for us of what it's going to be like?
Absolutely. And that's exactly what they are. They're both a feast. They're both a rehearsal and a memorial. Exodus and Passover, first fruits, Pentecost, those are memorial. And they're also, the fall feast are rehearsal.
Yeah.
Because they haven't happened yet.
Yeah.
They're going to happen exactly on the days, just like the spring feast did.
Yeah.
With Passover. They happen exactly on the days and when they were fulfilled. But the fall feast, we've got trumpets, atonement, tabernacles, and what's the other one? The 8th day, which is the 8th day of tabernacles.
So
those are going to be fulfilled in our future.
So would you say the tabernacles, that would be quote unquote the rapture, where we tabernacle with Christ, right?
Well, a lot of people believe that the Feast of Trumpets is when the rapture is going to happen.
Okay.
And then the Day of Atonement is Judgment Day, and the second coming is what a lot of people believe. And then the tabernacles comes 5 days after that, and it lasts for 7 days. That is where we tabernacle with the Lord, or he tabernacles with us.
Yeah.
And then you have the 8th day, and that's eternity.
Yeah. Yeah. So he would, more than likely, he would return on trumpets because it would announce the king. And so,
Yeah.
And then judgment, and then we would go stay with him. So we need to learn our feasts. The church really needs to learn its feasts.
I will be the first one to admit I am ignorant to the feasts. I have no idea when anything is. I admit it, and I think I'm probably like 99% of the church.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You know, they don't understand it. I mean, and it's not their fault. I mean, the theologians and church leaders for hundreds of years have intentionally taken the Jewish influence out of the church.
Yeah.
I mean, it started back in the first couple of centuries after the resurrection. But yeah, I mean, the Catholics really tried to take it out, and then the Protestants came out of that. So yeah, we've been de-Jewishized, I guess you call it.
Yeah.
You know,
we have.
But people don't realize that Jesus was Jewish.
Yeah.
And the Old Testament, you know, people will quote the Old Testament out of Psalms and stuff, or wherever they, you know, cherry pick a verse, but they don't understand that the Old Testament still applies.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In a lot of, as far as, I'm not under the law of the Old Testament, you know, like, for example, I like bacon, you know.
Here,
so,
Tom.
I'm not under the law, but I do believe that, you know, 2 Timothy 3:16, it says, all scripture is given by inspiration of God and is profitable for doctrine, reproof, correction, instruction of righteousness, so that the man of God will be thoroughly furnished to every good work. And when that was written, the Old Testament is the only scripture that existed.
Yeah.
The New Testament didn't exist yet.
That's great.
So, yeah, the Old Testament applies, but you have to interpret it through the cross. You have to interpret it in a new covenant perspective.
Yep.
No, that's 100% dead on. That's great.
Thank you. You just you're just one more person that I've talked to that just proved that I'm right.
That's the only reason we do this show, Tom. We're just trying to find people that prove Ben's right. That's all we do.
I'm glad I could make you feel better. But the feasts are the plan of God redemption.
Yeah.
They tell us what he's going to do and what the sequence is and kind of how it's going to look. For example, Passover. You had the Lamb of God, you know, sacrificed, and, you know, Jesus is now the Lamb of God. So, yeah, and he wasn't a physical lamb, or, you know, he wasn't put up on a physical altar, but in a symbolic sense, the Passover lamb showed us what Jesus was going to do on the cross.
Yeah.
So the fall feasts that are coming in our future are the same way. In some way, they symbolize what's going to happen and when in the year. We don't know what year yet, but when in a year, those things are going to happen.
Yeah, and that's why he told, was it Mary, don't touch me, because he still has to present himself, because he would have been first fruits.
Exactly. That's right. I believe that's true.
Yeah.
He was going up to present the first fruits offering as the high priest in the temple in heaven. And he didn't want to be ritually, impure.
Yeah, unclean. I
believe you're right.
Yeah. Well, Tom, this has been a great talk, man. We really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Thanks for sharing your knowledge with us.
Yeah, let me give you the fiction book website too.
Oh yeah, please
do that.
We interrupted you. I apologize. I interrupted you, not we.
No problem. It's www.thomasnoss.com. THOMASNOSS.com.
Now, I think the other thing too that I think maybe when we were talking in crosstalk, you had said before we hit record, I want to make sure this is right. You're actually releasing this. Would you say a chapter at a time? That's kind of how you're doing it,
right? Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. It's on Substack, so I'm sending it out one chapter a week. It's free, You just go to their website, thomasnoss.com, and you can sign up for it, and you don't have to pay anything. You get a chapter a week. I'm up to chapter 8 now, and there's 19 chapters in this book. Then there's going to be, this book covers from now until the revelation of the Antichrist and the manifestation of the sons of God. That's that spiritual outpouring I talked about before.
Mm-hmm.
All right. That's basically the middle of the tribulation, or the middle of Daniel's 70th week. All right. The second book is going to be a trilogy. The second book goes through the tribulation to the second coming. The third book is going to be the millennium.
So you're kind of doing your own, your own take, more proper than Left Behind. So
and for free.
Yeah, I tell
for
people
free.
It's Left Behind meets Top Gun, because there's a lot of exciting thriller scenes in it with the helicopter stuff.
All right, very good. Very cool, man. Very cool. Well, man, thanks so much for your time and sharing your knowledge with us. I really appreciate having you on, and it's been great talking to you.
This was good.
It's good, man.
Yeah.
Great. I appreciate it. Thanks.
So
Yeah, it was fun.
yeah, absolutely. All right, man. We'll
I
take
hope we
care.
didn't make too many people mad.
Oh,
Don't you worry, sir. Ben and I have already primed everybody to make anybody mad that's going to get mad out there. And, honestly, we have adopted the philosophy from Jump Street that we're going to speak God's truth and share our opinions on things. And if somebody gets frosty in the way, then maybe it'll drive them into their Bible to find out for themselves. Hey, I would like nothing more than somebody to go and actually send us an email at the dudes at thetfhc.com. So send us an email. You want to finger wag at us, go right ahead, because correct us. That way we know you're diving into your Bible and you're finding out for yourself, because no matter what anybody says on this show, we've said it before, you, me, guest, doesn't matter. Don't take our word for it. Go read for yourself. Grow your relationship. Go grow your relationship with God.
Yeah, that's true.
There you go.
Well, that's how we got to where we are now, is by doing that.
Yeah,
not following the mob, the horde, but by reading the Bible and coming up to our own conclusions, and hopefully they're right.
Yeah, absolutely. And the more people do that, we get in a circle, and iron sharpens iron. So very much so. So Tom, thanks so much for joining us, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, take care.
Atonement.